News Channel 5's Kelly Dunn.
When Tom Rooney first ran for Congress in 2008, he wasn't given much of a chance against incumbent Tim Mahoney. But with the help of a Mahoney sex scandal, Rooney was able to buck a Democratic tide.
You know, it's the whole spread the wealth mentality of Barack Obama and Tim Mahoney versus, keeping government out of the way but keeping us safe with Senator McCain and Tom Rooney.
Rooney was easily reelected 2 years later. Most recently, he took on his own Republican leader, House Speaker John Boehner, and defeated Boehner's plan to build additional military jet-ins that would have cost hundreds of millions of dollars.
The American people sent us here to change the way that Washington works.
Good morning and welcome to The Point. My guest today is Congressman Tom Rooney, a Republican from Tequesta, representing a congressional district that stretches from one side of the state to the other. And thank you very much, Congressman, for coming in today because of scheduling conflicts. I know it's the first time we've had you on To The Point, so we greatly appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me and thanks for your patience.
Oh, absolutely. And I know you're a little jet lagged, and we can understand why, because you were recently in Afghanistan. And let's get to the point. What's your opinion? Are we making progress against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda?
I think that we are, certainly with Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is basically hunkered down and basically non-existent at this point in Afghanistan. The Taliban, is going to be a much different story. We're building up their capacity for security. The key is to make sure that the local villages know that they can secure themselves against the Taliban. And don't make any mistake about it, they're sick of the Taliban too. So the problem is they're trying to hedge their bets to make sure that once we leave and we begin drawing down in July, that if the Taliban does come back in, they're not going to be punished for cooperating with us. So it's going to be difficult. Afghanistan's much different than Iraq. We were also there, and they had infrastructure, even though it was a dictatorship. And so their security forces are much further along than Afghanistan. With Petraeus now leaving Afghanistan, it's questionable.
Was it the day after you left that it was the 8 Americans who were killed?
Right. It was a couple days after we left. There was an incident at the airport there, which we flew in and out of, and apparently it was a Taliban person. I want to see what Karzai's response is to this guy. Certainly, we're buying him time to get his act together, and with the corruption in his government, it's frustrating. And we always hear that he's the best that we can do, and that's fine. But we're buying him time with the lives of our kids, and it's time for him to step up in leadership. And there was five other soldiers killed when we were there by suicide bomber, and one Sergeant Linda Pierre from Naples, Florida. So it was very emotional.
Is it secure enough to begin drawing, down those troops? I mean, can we safely do that?
When you got it, I think that you get to a point where it's, you got to cut the cord and say, it's now or never. We can't hold your hand any longer. And I think that maybe you could make the argument, we're not completely leaving in July. That's just when we begin on conditions on the ground. So, certainly the Afghan National Army is much further along than the police force there, which is a different entity. But there's still a lot of corruption there. But the Afghan National Army is getting a lot better. That we're having a lot less people leave. We're actually getting selective of who we let into that Afghan National. Before, we were taking whoever would come. So it's getting a lot better. But the guy that killed the 8 people was one of their apparent, people that we were training too. So that's what's frustrating.
Absolutely. When I told a friend that you were going to be our guest this week, she asked me to ask a question on behalf of her family and other military families. Her particular situation is that her son has been in the Army for 10 years. He and his family were stationed in Oklahoma. At that time, he and his wife bought a house. Well, he then has been deployed 3 times and is now at a base in Georgia. His family is still in Oklahoma because they cannot sell their house. And she was saying, is there anything the government can do to reunite these families? They're being separated by not only the deployments, but by this housing market.
Yeah, they're probably at Fort Sill, the house there in Oklahoma. And when we were at Fort Hood, that happened a lot in Texas. What people were doing was deploying the wives or husbands, depending, would end up moving back home wherever it was. And a lot of the soldiers that I served with would just end up renting their house out to other people. You have you know, the VA loan and stuff to make it a lot easier for people like that were in the military to buy the house and try to rent it out. But there really isn't any other service provided by the government under the Soldier Sailor Civil Relief Act, which usually covers a lot of that stuff. But definitely tell your friend that I will look into that, because, you know, that's not the first I've heard of that. And certainly with these military bases kind of condensing into just a few, the infrastructure growing around them has been great. But there are a lot of people stuck with houses, just like everywhere else, though. Right.
Well, being on the House Armed Services Committee, I mean, are there other things being done? What else? What can you tell military families that you and your counterparts in Washington are working on right now to help families, military families?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, the big thing for us was to make sure that they were getting paid. And, you know, one of the fears that we had with the potential government shutdown was the president wasn't giving us any assurances, as President Clinton and President Reagan had done before, that if there is a government shutdown, this will not affect military families. This administration wasn't making that promise. So we were very nervous, and we got a lot of emails and Facebook, you know, posts that, you know, from friends, not only friends of mine, but people I never met before, that were saying, if I don't get paid, we're going to default on the mortgage back at Fort Sill or wherever, and this is going to be bad. So, you know, there was no way we could have that, and we didn't want to kind of play chicken with whether or not the president would cut those checks off. So, I mean, that's first and foremost, is to say that we respect what they're doing. We put them in harm's way. We have to take care of them and their families while they're there, and also while we get home. Other things that, you know, my office has taken the lead on, we're the Wounds Caucus, which deals with post-traumatic stress disorder and severe brain injury. There was news that came out just yesterday that that those people that have, you know, specific diagnosis of severe brain injury are eligible for Purple Heart status, which has never been. It's hard to measure those kind of injuries, but, you know, certainly we've seen an increase in suicides in the military and former military. That, you know, it's just something that I couldn't ignore anymore. And so those are the type of things that hopefully, you know, we step up even as the rest of the budget contracts.
And you just presented some Blue Stars to some families on the Treasure Coast this week.
The Blue Star Award was a Treasure Coast idea that, you know, would give some closure, hopefully, to some of the parents that have lost loved ones in the service that were killed here rather than in a deployed setting.
Right.
And one was a pilot, died in a training accident. One Lieutenant Fletcher was actually murdered on Fort Hood, where I served, by another soldier. And, you know, a lot of time, and they're not eligible for Purple Heart. We wrote a letter to the Department of Defense asking them why and if they could be, and they said no. So Treasure Coast went ahead and did their own ceremony.
Yeah, it was very nice.
We presented them a flag flown over the Capitol, and I know that they appreciated it.
It certainly seemed like